How is it that Elon Musk seems to know more than the entire federal government combined? How is it that Elon Musk has information that not even the President of the United States would have? And by that I'm referring to the gold that sits in the Federal Reserve. He made a statement yesterday about how gold is missing, how much gold is missing. The only problem with that statement is that he has no clue how much is missing, because how would he know classified information like that? Because I'm pretty sure the President of the United States doesn't even know that information. And the other thing is that people believe him. And say, because now they're saying, see, there's fraud. Gold is missing from the reserve. Where did it go? Who took it? Yeah. Forget the fact that this makes no sense whatsoever. Okay, let's put it aside and say that this makes no sense whatsoever. But the fact that people are going along with this, instead of questioning how stupid this idiocy is, they actually believe him. How much gold bars does Fort Knox actually have? Or the reserve, or the Treasury Department? How much gold is missing, and how much are they supposed to have? And if it's supposed to be really, really secure, how did anybody come in to break in? And nobody knew about it. Don't you think if somebody broke in to a secure safe, this would have been reported all over the news? Fox, Newsmax, One America, all the right-wingers would be on top of this? Don't you think? And they'd probably be blaming the Democrats for this too? I laugh because of the stupidity of how people are. Is that Elon Musk says something and people automatically believe him. He says, oh, there's fraud in the government. Okay. And it was interesting that I saw last night on Lawrence O'Donnell, and he said something very smart on Lawrence O'Donnell. He said, actually, it might have been Rachel Maddow, I don't know, but one of them said, if there's fraud in the government, there's a right way to deal with it, and there's a wrong way. The right way would be to confront Congress. Well, the right way would be first to question the head of the agency, and then go to Congress and let them know, and try to figure out the where, the who, the what, and the why. Because the head of the departments, the head of these agencies, would have the answers, right? And they'd they'd show you the books, they'd show you the numbers, they would show you everything. That's the way to go about doing something, right? Not the way you're doing it now. And there's really no excuse for what's going on here. And a lot of people are starting to take notice with these protests. And yesterday was President's Day, and they felt it was appropriate yesterday to march in what they called a No King Day, which is Donald Trump has basically hasn't declared it, but has been acting as if he's a king and not a president by doing all of this. And so people are starting to take notice and protesting. And there's a nice quote that I read yesterday. The quote actually goes like this. Imagine being so stupid that you look at this treasonous, traitorous, totally corrupt, self-serving, ignorant clown. This racist, semi-illiterate moron, this sexually assaulting, pathologically lying, feeble-minded, morally bankrupt, constitutionally illiterate simpleton, this bloated nitwit with his cotton candy hair, radioactive tinted skin, and obese dishevelment, and think, now that is a guy I really admire. And if you admire this type of guy, and of course I'm talking about Donald Trump, if you admire a guy like this, then there is something seriously wrong with you. Then maybe you are the traitor. Maybe you are a traitor to the United States. Maybe. Because if you could, in good faith, in good conscience, follow this man and admire everything he does and say he can do no wrong, then maybe you're the problem. Because there's no way that somebody like this, anybody with a good conscience and good morals and ethics would not support a man like this, would not admire a man like this. They would actually question, how can we have a president who's got 34 counts, is a convicted felon, has been convicted of sexual assault, is a racist, a bigot. How could we have someone like this in office? And how could we have someone like this trusting the nuclear codes? How could we have a man who only cares about himself running this country? How can we trust a man like this, and how can we put our faith in a man like this? And yet here we are. It's not even, and I was thinking about this today, it's only a month in office, and the damage that he's already caused has been tremendous. Maybe not here, but in Africa alone, in South Africa alone, Elon Musk's home country. And if he's done that damage in only a month, in only the first 100 days, imagine the damage he can cause within the next 4 years. Damage that may forever be unrepairable. Imagine that. And when they get through with all the federal agencies and everything, what toy will Elon Musk have next to play with? What toy will he have to damage next once he finishes with all the federal agencies? And I don't understand why everybody you talk to, and it's amazing. You could learn a lot without saying a damn thing. You can learn a lot about people by reading and by observing. And it amazes me how many people admire this man. It's amazing how many people have reverted to cursing you out, to name-calling, to bashing if you don't agree with them. How they accuse you of having TDS, Trump deranged syndrome, which is something that they made up entirely out of their heads. And I laugh. And it's admiring to me is that we're trying to set them on the right path. And it amazes me how they curse us out, how they bash us, how they revert to name-calling like children. When you say things they do not want to hear. And John F. Kennedy said it best, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Do you know what that even meant? That meant people fear what they don't understand. Which is normal. And if you don't understand, you ask the questions. And if you don't ask the questions, you fall into these traps and put your faith in people who tell you they know better. But they don't. But is this who we become as a society now? It used to be that if we didn't agree with somebody, we'd have dialogue, we'd debate, we would ask questions, and we'd say, if you're wrong, okay. If you're wrong, I'm saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Thank you for correcting me. It's like you review a movie. It's like a movie critic reviewing the movie. They trash the movie. Does the director say, fuck you? No. The director says, I'm sorry you didn't like it. But you know what? The critics can love a movie and it bombs because the audience didn't like it. The critics could hate a movie, but the audience loves it. But if you're going to review a movie or a TV show, and the show's creator doesn't like the review and goes and says, fuck you, you shouldn't review, why are you so mean to me? It's unprofessional. You got to learn how to take criticism. You got to take the good with the bad. And if somebody tells you it's not good, ask them, what did you like about it? How can I improve on it? Do you have any suggestions? That's what you do focus groups for. I do focus groups because you have a new product out there. You want people's opinion, or you're trying to update a product, so you want the public's opinion. So you're doing focus groups. The feedback is not going to be positive. You're not going to get positive feedback. Does that mean, I'm going to fire this company? They're biased. They purposely wanted people to give bad reviews. So fuck them. We're going to find a different company. No, that's not how it works, though. That's not how it works. You are the leader. It's like a manager. It's like you're a leader. You have to fall in line. If something goes wrong, man up and take responsibility for it. It happened on your watch. If that means you're going to lose your job, okay. If it means take one for the team, fine. If you're the one who has to take the fall because it happened on your watch and you're the leader, then be the leader. I've been a manager. I know what it takes. I have. And I'm not going to tell my employees to do something that I wouldn't do because I'm not a hypocrite. And they look at you because it's about respect. Because if I do something and then I told them, and I'm doing exactly what I told them not to do, why would they respect me? Why would they end up doing the work? And if morale is low, production is low, right? And they emulate you as the manager. And they're supposed to look up to you and respect you. So I wouldn't ask them to do something I wouldn't do. But if something happens, I'm going to take responsibility and say, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. I used bad judgment. It won't happen again. And if you want to suspend me, you know what? I deserve it. That's what a true leader is. Okay? And the President of the United States is the leader. He's the leader of the free world. We vote him into office to represent us as a nation. We may not like things he does, and that's why we have elections every 4 years as a way of firing the leader. Same with Congress. We don't like what our senator is doing or our congressman is doing. Vote them out of office. Fire them and find somebody who will do it. And I'm pretty sure that Joe Biden was a leader. Okay? I may not have liked a lot of things he did. And by the way, if Joe Biden was doing all of the stuff that Elon Musk is doing now, I can bet you 100% Republicans would be up in arms demanding answers. Okay? If you want to talk about hypocrisy, if Joe Biden was doing this if Joe Biden had someone doing exactly what Elon Musk is doing now, by tearing apart the federal government, the Republicans would be up in arms, demanding answers. They'd want Joe Biden impeached, and they'd want the other person impeached, and they're like, but Donald Trump is doing this, and the Democrats demanding answers. And what did Comer do? Told the Democrats to shut up and sit down. And nobody's questioning that. Nobody's really asked that question. And yes, Joe Biden was taken to court many times. The student loans, he was taken to court. Just because it seems like a good idea doesn't necessarily make it a good idea. And that's why it's important to have a legal system. That's why it's important to have a legal system. This is why it's important to have the three branches of government. And Joe Biden didn't appeal the decision, or maybe he did. I don't know, but he did say that maybe we have to go back to the drawing board and try this again. The judges obviously didn't agree with us. They thought it was a bad idea. Maybe we should go back to the drawing board and come up with a better idea that won't get us sued. That's how you do it. Not trying to go to the Supreme Court and say, I need permission to fire the ethics. And let me ask you a question. Why is he going to the Supreme Court to get permission if he didn't get permission for anything else out there? If he needed Congress's permission regarding all these federal agencies, then why would he go to the Supreme Court to ask permission to fire the ethics panel? That doesn't make any sense. Something isn't kosher here, because those federal agencies were created through Congress. They're funded by Congress, and they can only be dismantled by Congress. And if you wanted permission, then you go to Congress. And if the Congress says no, then you go to a judge and you ask for permission. So if you didn't do that to dismantle every federal agency and fire thousands of employees, why are you going to the Supreme Court about the ethics committee to get rid of them when you've just been doing it left and right on your own? Is there something I'm missing here? Is there something I'm missing here? Because I really don't know. And how do you have somebody like Elon Musk getting into secure areas when nobody else can? And you have to have security clearance to do that, to get into secure, sensitive, classified areas. And in the meantime, Elon Musk is just freely walking in there and getting that access. Explain to me, how is that? How is that? How is he getting into the IRS? How is he getting into the Treasury? And how is he seeing all this gold? And then claiming and he's into the social. Now he's into the Social Security system. I'm saying this fraud there. Elon Musk is lying to the American people, and nobody seems to realize it. And think about this one. Remember how Republicans and Donald Trump said, we're the party of free speech? We're the party of free speech and the First Amendment rights. But he bans the Associated Press. Just to back up here, the Associated Press is an independent news organization who are not biased. Millions of other news organizations rely on the Associated Press for news. Just like they rely on Gannett for pictures and things like that, or Getty. They rely on Getty for images and things like that. The Associated Press is an independent news organization that's been around for many, many years that feed their information to organizations like the New York Times, NBC, the Daily News, the USA Today. You get the idea. But they got banned from the White House because they refused to go along with Donald Trump's scheme of calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. They refused to go along with it. And so what did Donald Trump do? He banned them from the press pool. Imagine that. Imagine that. They refused to acknowledge it as the Gulf of America, and rightly so. And so they got punished by being told your press credentials are no longer valid here in the White House. I don't recognize it. I don't recognize it as the Gulf of America. I recognize it as the Gulf of Mexico. Because for those people who know, the Gulf of Mexico is international waters. They're not part of America. And I'm going to ask you another question. Where does the Gulf of America begin? In fact, let's do a Google search right now to find out, shall we? Let's do this Google search together, shall we? Where does the Gulf of Mexico start and end? Should we do that? It begins at the southern tip of North America and ends at the island of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, I don't know what the southern tip is, so let's do it this way. In the north, here are the boundaries of the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is bordered by the United States of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. See, I'm just learning this for the first time. To the west, it's bordered by the Mexican states of Quintana Roo, Tamaulipas, Veracruz, Tabasco. I guess that's where you get Tabasco sauce from, right? Campeche and the Yucatan. Okay? All names I've never heard of, except for Tabasco and Yucatan. In the southeast, the Gulf of Mexico was bordered by the island of Cuba. Now, there's no east here, apparently, but okay. So in the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico connects to the Atlantic Ocean through the Straits of Florida. The Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico connects to the Caribbean Sea through the Yucatan Channel. So, the size of the Gulf of Mexico is about 1,100 miles from the east to the west and 800 miles from the north to the south. It covers about an area of about 600 square miles. The Gulf of Mexico is known for its barrier islands, which extends from Florida to eastern Louisiana, eastern Texas to eastern Mexico. The Gulf is also home to many important species, including the red snapper, Florida manatee, and Rice's whale. Things I actually did not know. Okay, now why is it not considered an ocean? It's a semi-enclosed body of water that's connected to the Atlantic Ocean by the Straits of Florida. I don't know what that means. But let's go to the Britannica. Let's do this. Where is the Gulf of Mexico located? What is the deepest point? Here we go. Gulf of Mexico. A partially Atlantic body of water on the southern eastern periphery of North America. Continent is connected to the Atlantic Ocean by the Straits of Florida, which is running between the peninsula of Florida and to the island of Cuba, to the Caribbean Sea by the Yucatan Channel, which runs between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. All right, so I don't know what Straits of Florida is, but here it is. It's a passage connecting the Gulf of Mexico with the Atlantic Ocean. It is about 93 miles at its narrowest width between the Florida Keys on the north and Cuba on the south, and it extends east to the Bahamas, which makes sense why cruise ships will go through the Gulf of Mexico when they're going to the Bahamas or the Caribbean or to the U.S. Virgin Islands or British Virgins or anything like that. The straits mark the area where the Florida Current, the initial part of the Gulf Stream, flows eastward out of the Gulf of Mexico with a mean surface velocity of 4 to 6 miles per hour. The Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon first recorded sailing through the straits in 1513. All right, there's a whole bunch here of scientific study that's not really important. Okay, maybe I've been wrong. Maybe the Gulf of America, maybe the Gulf of Mexico, maybe the Gulf of Mexico is not part of the intent, maybe starts in America. I don't know for sure. I'm just explaining where it begins, where it ends. But it's basically, but at least now you know that where it starts. And Florida basically is bordering Cuba. Florida does border Cuba, Miami Beach, to be exact. Which is why when people are escaping from Cuba, they end up in Florida. Which is why Florida has a big Latino population. In Miami Beach especially, because they've all emigrated from Cuba or escaped from Cuba. The name of Gulf of Mexico here, and while I was stalling, the name of Gulf of Mexico has been applied to the body of water since at least the late 16th century. English geographer Richard Hakluyt referred to the Gulf of Mexico, here spelled Gulfe, in the principal navigations, voyages, and discoveries of the English nation in 1589. That same year, Italian cartographer Battista Boazio produced a map of Sir Francis Drake's 1585-86 naval campaign against Spanish colonial holdings in the Americas. Boazio's depicted in Drake's fleet skirting the edge of the Bay of Mexico, spelled here Baye, and keep in mind that the spelling back then was a lot different than we have them today, but it has the same meaning. Other names were including the Gulf of New Spain and the Florida Sea. Appeared in maps and in publications over subsequent centuries. In 2025, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, BGN, adopted the name Gulf of America for use by U.S. federal agencies in accordance with President Donald Trump's Executive Order 14172. But I'm assuming they had no choice because this is required since it's a federal agency. I don't know. I never heard of the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. This is the first time hearing of it, so I really don't know. The shores of the Gulf of Mexico are major habitat for waterfowl, shorebirds, nudies, boobies, pelicans, seabird winters along the coast of Mexico, Cuba, zone offshore. So, this is my point of why facts matter. Because if you don't know something, you ask. And I am just now proving to you all of this history of the Gulf of Mexico, things that I didn't even know. And by asking questions, it's how you learn. By asking questions, it's how you gain knowledge. By researching, it's how you know about things. And for those that don't know, here's a fun fact. Francis Drake was featured in the storyline in one of the Uncharted games. You know, Uncharted for the PlayStation. Francis Drake was the storyline in one of the Uncharted games, and the idea was they were trying to find Drake's treasure. So, fun fact. So I just proved that I was going through what they call the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is the most respected encyclopedia out there, one of the oldest ones. And just so you know, here's a question. Who owns the Gulf of Mexico? Or as you Magites want to call it, America, Gulf of America. But who owns the Gulf of Mexico? And I'm going to always call it that. Today, tomorrow, forever. But unlike land, which can be owned by states, local governments, corporations, or private individuals, the waters and submerged lands of the outer continental shelf are entirely administered by the federal government. So, here's one. Is the Gulf of Mexico part of the U.S. or Mexico? Is the Gulf of Mexico part of the U.S. or Mexico? The Gulf of Mexico is shared by the United States, Mexico, and Cuba. The U.S. claims 46% of the Gulf, and Mexico claims 49%, which basically means that you would have to get Mexico's permission to change the name. Something that Donald Trump did not do. Now you're going to say, But Mark, it's only a 3% difference. So why does it matter? Because think of it like this. It's like owning shares of stock, right? If you are a majority stock, if you are a minority stock shareholder of a stock, who are they going to get the approval from? The minority or the majority? Same thing as anything. Seniority or not seniority. If you've been there if you have seniority, you get first dibs, right? If you're a college professor with tenure, you can't get fired because that's your seniority. And since the U.S. and Mexico share with Cuba, then you have to discuss it together. You can't just change a name because you don't like Mexico. And you don't think Mexico can go ahead and say, screw you? What right do you have to change the name without consulting us? And by the way, the name Gulf of Mexico comes from a Native American city with the same name, not the modern state of Mexico. And here's a fun fact, and speaking of Mexico owning 3% more than we do, President Trump signed an executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. However, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said that the name Gulf of Mexico is still correct. That's what she said. And speaking of the AP News about this, the AP News is asking, can Donald Trump actually change the name? The White House says it's a fact that the Gulf of Mexico has been renamed. Is that correct? On February 12th, the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. It's very important to this administration that we get that right. Not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world. But she didn't show any evidence to back that up. Is it a fact? Because you change the name? Changing the name doesn't make it true. Unless you can prove it. If I change my name to say Daniel Schmidt, I can't just change my name and say my name is Daniel Schmidt. You have to go to court to get a name change. And you have to explain to the judge why you want to change your name. I can't just say, call me Daniel Schmidt. My ID says Mark on it. My passport says my name is Mark Klein. My ID says Mark Klein. My Social Security says my name. And that's my name legally. I can't go to the airport and say, yeah, my ID is wrong. My name is Daniel Schmidt. This is why facts matter. You can't say this is a fact and then not prove it. Just because you say it's a fact doesn't mean it's so. And this is where you get the power of suggestion. Where you can play with someone. This is the power of suggestion, which is what hypnosis is. And if you say the lie long enough, eventually people believe it to be true. And why is it important to the administration that people get this right? Why is it so important that people get Gulf of America? Why? Why is it important to the administration to recognize the Gulf of America? You haven't even told me why. You haven't shown me any evidence to the contrary why calling it the Gulf of America over the Gulf of Mexico is important to you. You haven't shown me any proof. And when the Associated Press was asking that question to Caroline Leavitt, she basically said, get him out of here, and revoked their press credentials. Why? What are you hiding? What's the secret? You made a statement as fact, and the reporter is asking a valid question. So you can't make a statement like that. That's very broad, that's very vague, by the way. You can't make a statement like that and then not have a follow-up question. All the reporter is asking is, why is it important that we get it right? Like, what's so special? You renamed it. Nobody asked you to rename it. So the reporter was asking the right question, and the reporter was doing their job. And your answer is, take away the press credentials. What about freedom of the press? What about free speech? You're so ensconced and so saying you are the party of free speech. Donald Trump kept saying, you're violating my First Amendment rights in court, but you give me a gag order. That's violation of free speech, my violation of my First Amendment rights, right? And yet here you have a reporter who's asking an innocent question, an important question, and you're basically telling her, go fuck yourself. You're not welcome here anymore. And nobody's, and no other reporter is concerned about this. Are we now afraid of a press secretary who has no experience doing this, but because she's blonde and pretty, we're not going to stand up to her? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. To continue, Trump's effort to rewrite the map of the world is far more complicated than such comments suggest. Here's what goes to a name. Did Trump rename the Gulf of Mexico? Before his inauguration, he announced plans to change the name and signed an executive order to do so as soon as he was in office. Can he change it on his own? For official United States purposes, yes. But he can't dictate what the rest of the world calls it, which is what he did. He basically demanded that Google, Apple, encyclopedias, atlases, he basically demanded they all change the name. And like a bunch of morons, they all caved and changed the name. And they issued an update to Google Maps so that on your phone it now says Gulf of America. He cannot dictate that. The world can call it whatever the hell they want. They can call it the Gulf of Kiss My Ass for all they care. And here's what I didn't know of either. The International Hydrographic Organization, of which both the United States and Mexico are members. I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what organization this is, so don't even ask me. Hydro, I would assume it means something about water. But again, I don't know. It works to ensure that all the world's seas, oceans, and navigable waters are surveyed and charted uniformly, and also names some of them. There are instances where countries refer to the same body of water by different names in their own documentation. It can be easier when a landmark or body of water is within a country's boundaries. In 2015, then President Obama approved an order from the Department of Interior to rename Mount McKinley, the highest peak in North America, to Denali, a move that Trump has also reversed. Not going to unlike other people, I ain't going to comment on it because I don't know the story behind it. Mount McKinley was named obviously after President McKinley, but I don't understand where the name Denali comes from. So unlike MAGA and right-wingers, I'm not going to make a comment without knowing any of the facts, without any information, because I don't want to seem like an ignorant person. Are others following Trump's lead? As I said earlier, the Mexican president has brushed off Trump's move, saying the president can use whatever name he prefers for his portion, for the United States' portion of the water. For them, it is still the Gulf of Mexico, and for the entire world, it is still the Gulf of Mexico. And she's right. Google Maps, as I said, is using Gulf of America for users in the U.S., saying it has a long-standing practice of following the U.S. government's lead on such matters. Well, if that's true, then okay. Then I apologize. If that is true, then I apologize. But again, if that's Google's policy, I don't know their policy, and I'm not about to go into their entire database and start looking for specific things. Users in Mexico will still see the Gulf of Mexico on their Google phones and maps will display both names for those logging in from other countries. The other online provider, Apple Maps, has also changed it, but only on some browsers. The AP said, and this is where the whole thing started, the AP said that it would continue to refer to the Gulf of Mexico while noting Trump's decision to rename it as well. And if that's the case, then they should not have had their press credentials revoked. If that is the case. And as I said, they are a global news agency that gives news to every news organization in the entire world, not just the United States. The AP says it must ensure that place names and geography are easily recognizable to all audiences, since they are a global news agency that disseminates news around the world, as I said earlier. The AP style book is relied on by thousands of journalists and other writers globally. The White House has blocked AP reporters from covering several events after demanding the news agency alter its style, which they aren't allowed to do. So the next question is, why is Trump doing this? Since his first run for the White House back in 2016, Trump has repeatedly clashed with Mexico over a number of issues, including border security, imposition of tariffs on imported goods. He vowed them to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, which he never finished. He also promised that Mexico would pay for that wall, which they never did. Guess who had to pay for it? You guessed it, taxpayers. The U.S. ultimately constructed or refurbished about 450 miles of wall, which still remains incomplete to this day. How did the Gulf of Mexico get its name? It's been called the Gulf of Mexico for more than 4 centuries. An original determination, as I said earlier, believed to have been taken from the Native American city of Mexico. Again, this is something you can research on your own. I don't know the story behind it either. Has renaming the Gulf of Mexico come up before? Yes, it has. In 2012, a member of the Mississippi legislature proposed a bill to rename portions of the Gulf that touch that state's beaches Gulf of America, a move the bill author later referred to as a joke. That bill, which was referred to a committee, obviously did not pass. 2 years earlier, comedian Stephen Colbert had joked on his show that following the massive Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, it should be renamed Gulf of America because we broke it, we bought it. I mean, who could have seen that foreshadowing? It was a joke made by Stephen Colbert, but who could have seen that foreshadowing? Are there other international disputes over names of places? Yes. The Sea of Japan, between North Korea, Japan, South Korea, Russia, with South Korea arguing that the current name was commonly used, and Korea was under Japanese rule. At an International Hydrographic Organization meeting in 2020, member states agreed on a plan to replace names with numerical identifiers and develop a new digital standard for modern geographic information systems. Again, also speaking of Gulfs, the Persian Gulf has been widely known by that name since the 16th century, although the usage of Gulf and Arabian Gulf is dominant in many countries in the Middle East. The government of Iran threatened to sue Google in 2012 over the company's decision not to label the body of water. The hack in WikiLeaks, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told an audience that by China's logic that it claimed nearly the entirety of the South of China Sea. Then the U.S. after World War II could have labeled the Pacific Ocean the American Sea, which they obviously did not do. Americans and Mexicans also diverge on what to call another river that forms the border between Texas and the Mexican states of Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo Leon, and Tamaulipas. Americans called the Rio Grande, Mexicans called the Rio Bravo. So as you see, there's a lot of history here. As you see, there is a lot of history here, and I just name. And it's important to understand it's important to understand the politics behind things. You can't just praise somebody for renaming something because someone you admire likes it without understanding the backstory of it first. And that's important to understand, because without that backstory, you will believe what anyone tells you instead of questioning it. And I just did this with all of you now. Most of the stuff I'm hearing about for the very first time. Okay? It never occurred to me to look into the history of the Gulf of Mexico because, number one, I didn't care. Number two, it didn't concern me one way. It doesn't concern me one way or the other. It doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. And I never gave it much thought. But because it's in the news a lot lately, I realized, you know what? Let me do this podcast and let's try to figure this out together. You may not agree with anything I'm reading here, but I did a simple Google. And somebody said to me, "Oh, you're doing your podcast, but you're not proving any facts." And you know what? I just did it right now. I Googled it together. I said what I was typing out loud. I told you the site I'm reading. And there's plenty here. You can go to the Independent, which is a UK paper. You know, you can go to AP. You can go to Yahoo News. You can go to Wikipedia. The Marjorie. I went to Britannia, the Britannica. I just told you where I went. You can watch videos. You know, there's plenty here. You can go to the New York Times. Does the Gulf of Mexico touch the U.S.? You know, there's a map here. How deep is the Gulf? These are questions. And again, you get the gist of this. Without questions, we don't have knowledge. Knowledge is power. But without knowing what we're talking about, that's why I say facts matter. They always have and they always will. Whether or not, and Mark Twain said, facts are facts, and you can do whatever you want with those facts. But understand the facts first before you distort it. Just because you don't like what you're reading or hearing doesn't mean you have a right to spread your own conspiracy theory or propaganda, because that's dangerous. Because if it's wrong information, like the wildfires in California, which sadly people lost their homes and their lives, that's dangerous. It is very dangerous. And the fact of the matter is, these are people who are teaching their kids, and their kids are growing up thinking this information, and it's wrong. If you start taking away certain things, if you're telling schools they can't teach A, B, and C, but they can only teach A, these kids are going to grow up thinking that that's the way of life because they don't know anything else. Because you can't tell them, you can't tell them about this, you can't tell them about this. I mean, what happens if President Trump says we can't have Black History Month anymore, or we can't celebrate the Chinese New Year anymore? Then what? While the Gulf of Mexico is important, you can call it whatever you like. You want to call it the Gulf of America, call it the Gulf of America. You want to call it the Gulf of I wipe my ass clean with two-ply, call it that if you want. But don't tell somebody else, but don't demand that somebody else call it the name you change it to simply because you changed it. If you knew Donald Trump, and I proved it, Donald Trump is a stupid person. Ignorant, he's a stupid person. He's stupid, he's ignorant, he knows nothing. He likes to think he does. But he obviously has no clue what the Associated Press does. He has obviously no clue what they do. Because if he did, he wouldn't be questioning them, they wouldn't be revoking their press pass. You can name it whatever you want, as I said. But if the AP but if the AP is a global service that provides the news to worldwide, not just here in America, but to everybody all over the world, which is why they're called the Associated Press, by the way, and they're not biased at all. But if they're asking these questions, it's because their readers need to because other people need to understand this, because it's confusing. If I go to Spain and I open a map and the map says Gulf of America, you don't think somebody's going to go, what the hell is the Gulf of America? I thought it was the Gulf of Mexico. Or if Cuba goes Gulf of Cuba, what the hell is the Gulf of Cuba? I never heard of Gulf of Cuba. Oh, we changed it now. You better follow. You better call it what it is now. Otherwise there's going to be a fine. Like, you can't demand the press covers whatever the hell you want to cover. That's a dictatorship. That's what a state agency like RSN does, which is a Russian state news network. A dictatorship is, we tell you what to say. You believe what we want you to believe. You think what we want you to think. You do what we want you to do. And if you don't do any of it, and if you don't follow the rules that we're going to tell you, we're going to have you arrested for treason. That's not a democracy, my friends. That's not a democracy. And this was also a very interesting one. This is a quote that was actually said by Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt will always be remembered for the Museum of Natural History. Theodore Roosevelt was an avid hunter. And one day his wife got really fed up with him because the entire house had all of these things from his adventures in jungling. I know it's not a word, but okay, from his hunting and everything, it was in his house, and his wife got fed up and said, "Hey, you got to do something." And so he created the Museum of Natural History to keep all his game hunting. So all the animals that you see in the wings and everything, all of these you see, the animals, the mammal wing and everything, was because of Teddy Roosevelt. Those are all the animals that he hunted and shot and had and used for taxidermy. So we have him to thank for it. But anyway, and also he was the chief of police in New York City before he was president. In fact, the book The Alienist is set in that time period where Theodore Roosevelt was the chief of police. That is a fact, actually, that Theodore Roosevelt was the chief of police, and his cousin, or his cousin, maybe it was FDR. So, a little history. But anyway, he said, patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the president. Patriotism means to stand by the country, and I'm adding the word Constitution. It does not mean to stand by the president. Which basically means, if the president gives you an order that's unlawful and unconstitutional, you are not obligated to follow that by any means. Because you took an oath to the Constitution, you took an oath to the country. And you follow the laws of this country, which is the Constitution. Because if there was no Constitution, then you get to follow the laws of the president because there's no country. But because we have a country, that's what patriotism is. If you believe someone is asking you to do something that's immoral or unethical or illegal, the right thing to do is to report it. Because if you follow what they tell you to do, then you're no better than them and you're just as complicit. And you will suffer the same fate that they do. And if you don't believe me, you can look at Atlanta, when those people who tried to rig the election pleaded guilty, went to jail, and in some cases lost their law licenses. And so Teddy Roosevelt said it the best. Patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the president. And he was the president, Theodore Roosevelt. He was the president of the United States, and he's giving you this advice. He's basically telling you, don't follow me if I tell you something that's illegal. If I give you an order that's illegal, don't follow it. And if Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States and a damn good one, okay, if he's giving this quote, then you obviously know that he's a smart man. He's a smart man. Because what person who's a president is going to tell you, follow me because I'm the country? Since I run the country, that means I'm the country. So follow me. And it doesn't matter what I tell you to do. If I tell you to do it, I'm not breaking the law. Because I'm the president and I don't break laws. But that's not how it works. And one last thing I want to leave you with, because, again, I don't want to go past the hour time mark. Jim Mattis. Do you remember him? He was Trump's first Secretary of Defense in his first term. Do you remember him? He said this publicly. On one of the news programs. He said, Trump has the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader. And I posted that quote on social media. I posted that everywhere. And you couldn't believe that people started going batshit crazy. People were up in arms. They cursed me out and they're like, when is your hatred for Trump going to stop? Look, I don't understand. And this goes back to what I said in the beginning about Donald Trump. Imagine being so stupid that you look at this treasonous traitor, totally corrupt, self-serving, ignorant clown, this racist, semi-illiterate moron, the sexually assaulting, pathologically lying, feeble-minded, morality bankrupt, the constitutionally illiterate simpleton, this bloated nitwit with his cotton candy hair, radioactive tinted skin, and obese, disheveled thing. Now, that is a guy I really admire. And it goes back to this, and not to mention narcissist. And it doesn't matter who wrote this. It doesn't really matter. The point, whoever wrote it is a hero and is a patriot. Yes, because they are standing up to this guy, letting the world know that I am not afraid to stick up for Trump, and if everybody else did it, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now. If everybody had big balls like that hacker who's named Big Balls, we wouldn't be in the situation. So whoever's writing it is saying to you, I'm a patriot. I'm a patriot to my country. It is related to what Theodore Roosevelt said. Theodore Roosevelt said, patriot means to stand by the country. And by saying this quote about Donald Trump, whoever were saying, yes, Trump is a moron, Trump is a stupid head, Trump is ignorant, Trump doesn't know what the Constitution says, he's never even read the Constitution, he doesn't know the laws of the country. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm going to stand up for it. If you want to curse me out for it, so be it. If you want to attack me for it, so be it. But I'm going to call out the bullshit. And if you don't call out the bullshit, you're just as complicit and you deserve whatever you get. And that, my friends, is patriotism. That, my friends, is what we need to fight for. Because if we don't fight for it, we're not going to have anything left to fight for. Because until it affects you, you're not going to understand. And we already see people who voted for him are beginning to turn on him. Because they are starting to see that they were lied to and they were conned. And people are starting to wake up. And that is exactly what we need. People to get out of this cult, out of their brainwashed status, and back to the reality of what is really happening. Because it's affecting your loved ones, your family members, your friends, your parents. Think about that. If your parents only can survive on a Social Security check that's no longer coming because of Elon Musk, what are you going to do then? Who are you going to blame? Who are you going to blame? Joe Biden? Charles Schumer? George Soros? Wake up, MAGA. Wake up. Open your goddamn eyes. Okay? It's enough. You had your fun. You made your point. You lost. Open your eyes. You lost the battle. It's time to come back to reality.